You are a dial painter at the United States Radium Corporation in Orange, New Jersey, 17 years old, in April 1925, and Dr. Frederick Flynn arrives tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock to conduct medical examinations that will legally document your disintegrating jaw as syphilis rather than radium poisoning. What the company calls thorough occupational health screening, and what you call the moment when 14 months of licking radium-coated brushes 50 times per shift stops being a job technique and becomes evidence for a diagnosis that will follow you for life and disqualify you from any future. Not because the examination itself is the problem. Because signing the consent form, Dr. Flynn carries the one pre-printed with syphilis diagnosis language, the one that authorizes publication of his findings in medical journals under your full legal name, creates the specific paper trail that disqualifies you from testifying when Catherine Wiley's federal investigation arrives in 11 days, and Dr. Flynn cannot be bought or reasoned with because his academic reputation and ongoing corporate consulting contracts depend on producing medical testimony that protects the company from liability claims. Here is what 11 days actually costs, when every dial you painted to earn triple your father's wages becomes Exhibit A in a case where your crumbling jawbone must speak louder than a Columbia University professor's testimony, and staying silent keeps you employed until you physically cannot testify, but speaking up means losing your income the day before a federal investigator might have listened. 56 other dial painters working the current shift who will continue the lip dip paint technique for another 18 months if no testimony reaches Catherine Wiley. Quinta MacDonald, already hospitalized with jaw removed. The legal precedent for occupational disease liability that does not yet exist in 1925 New Jersey law. The notice appears on the factory door at 6:45, still wet with paste. 3 girls are already reading it when you arrive, their breath visible in the cold morning air, none of them speaking. Your jaw aches. 3 extraction sites, 2 weeks old, throbbing in rhythm with your pulse. The notice lists examination requirements in typed columns: full mouth inspection, jaw palpation, written consent for diagnosis publication. The phrase "refusal constitutes voluntary termination" appears twice, once at the top in bold type, once at the bottom in standard weight, as though someone wanted to be certain it registered in 2 different ways. You read it through once, then again counting words this time instead of absorbing meaning. 8 o'clock tomorrow morning. Dr. Frederick Flynn, consulting physician, Columbia University. Mandatory participation for all dial painting staff employed prior to March 1925. Medical findings to be documented for industrial hygiene research purposes. The girls beside you aren't speaking, but their silence contains everything. Molly touches her jaw while reading, fingers pressing gently against the hinge point. Catherine Schaub reads only the first paragraph before walking away. Quinta reads it twice, lips moving slightly, then stands motionless for 30 seconds before turning toward the factory entrance. You memorize who reads it twice, who touches their jaw, who walks past as though the paper does not exist at all. 14 months you've been painting dials. 14 months of brush tip between lips to sharpen the point, dip in radium powder mixed with adhesive, paint numerals smaller than pinheads, 800 dials per day. The powder tastes metallic and sweet, a combination that has become so familiar you no longer think of it as a taste, just the texture of work. $22 per week. Your father earns $7 at the textile mill. The 3 extraction sites ache differently this morning, not surface pain, deeper. The bone beneath feels soft when you press your tongue against it, yielding in a way that makes you stop pressing and focus on something else. 11 days until Catherine Wiley arrives. Federal labor investigator. Scheduled facility inspection May 14th. The date has been posted in the supervisor's office since March, and every girl who can read knows it, though nobody mentions it directly. Dr. Flynn's examination happens tomorrow. Catherine Wiley's inspection happens in 11 days. The gap between those 2 events is exactly the size of the decision you have to make. Submit to examination. Accept diagnosis. Sign consent. Disqualify yourself from federal testimony. Keep your job until your jaw finishes crumbling. Refuse examination. Lose your position before Catherine Wiley arrives. Lose the $22 per week. Lose the reason your family's rent gets paid. The notice stays on the door all morning. Girls file past it without stopping, their rhythm unchanged. 40 workers arriving between 6:45 and 7:15. The ones who read it don't discuss it. The ones who don't read it walk faster. Grace Fryer stopped painting in March. Her jaw took 6 months to heal after extraction, then didn't heal at all. The socket still drains. You count symptoms the way you count completed dials. Molly. 3 loosened teeth. Gum recession visible when she smiles. Catherine. Jaw pain she hides by chewing on the left side only. Barely noticeable unless you watch for it. Quinta. Limp that appeared last month. Worsened to the point where she holds the table edge when standing. Your own jaw. 3 extractions. Bone softness. Persistent ache that worsens in cold air. The factory floor opens at 7. You take your station, 3rd row, 4th position from the left. Brush, radium powder, adhesive mixture. Watch dial blanks stacked in wooden trays. The work begins the way it always begins. Brush tip between lips. Dip. Paint. The phosphorescent glow coats your tongue. Metallic sweetness. Gritty texture between your teeth. 800 dials per day. $22 per week. 11 days until federal inspection. 8 o'clock tomorrow morning Dr. Flynn arrives with his pre-printed forms, his Columbia credentials, his consulting contract that pays him more in 1 month than you earn in 6. The numbers arrange themselves in your mind like dial numerals, small, precise, impossible to ignore. You paint numeral after numeral while the morning light comes through the factory windows, and the notice on the door stays exactly where it was posted, the paste drying slowly, the paper curling slightly at the edges. The factory floor smells of adhesive sweetness and machine oil as morning shift begins. 40 girls at 40 stations, brushes moving in synchronized rhythm. Supervisors count completed dials on clipboards that never leave their hands. Dr. Flynn published preliminary findings in the Journal of Industrial Hygiene last month. Radium ingestion poses no health risk to workers. The conclusion appeared in bold type. You know because Edna Hussman's brother attends Columbia and brought her a copy. She read it once and stopped mentioning her wrist pain to anyone. You paint using the technique they taught you on your first day. Brush tip between lips to sharpen the point. Dip in radium powder mixed with adhesive. Paint numbers smaller than pinheads. The phosphorescent glow coats your tongue with metallic sweetness that lingers until lunch, then through lunch, then until you go home and lie awake tasting metal and adhesive, and something else you cannot name. The girl beside you paints with her left hand now. Her right wrist has begun to swell. The joint hot to touch when she accidentally bumps your arm reaching for a fresh dial blank. She hasn't mentioned it to supervisors. 3 girls who reported wrist pain were terminated for malingering before their 2-week notice period expired. Mr. Roeder ate a radium-laced cracker at the Christmas party to demonstrate safety. He ate it with his hands, not his mouth. And nobody thought to ask why the demonstration required distance between radium and digestive tract. Your brush moves in steady rhythm. Dip, paint, set aside to dry. The dial blanks are brass, circular, 3/4 of an inch in diameter. The numerals you paint are smaller than pinheads. Precision work, delicate work, work that pays $22 per week when your father earns 7. The radium powder glows faintly, even in daylight. Greenish-white. Phosphorescent. Beautiful, if you think of it that way. Most of the girls did think of it that way, in the beginning. Some still do. Your hands glow in the dark. Your clothes glow where you've touched them. Your hair glows if you run your fingers through it, during shift. At night. In your bedroom. You can see the faint outline of your own hands against the dark fingertips traced in luminous green. The supervisor walks past your station, glances at your completed dial count, marks something on her clipboard. She doesn't speak. The count is adequate. 800 per day is the quota. You're averaging 780. Close enough. Across the room, Quinta paints with her head tilted slightly left, compensating for something. Her jaw, probably. She's been chewing on one side only for the past 3 weeks. You noticed because you've started doing the same thing. The 3 extraction sites in your own jaw throb steadily. Not sharp pain. Deep, dull, persistent. The bone beneath feels wrong. Soft. You press your tongue against the inside of your lower jaw, and the bone yields slightly, gives way in a manner that bone should never give way, and you stop pressing and focus on painting. Brush tip between lips, sharpen the point, dip in radium powder, paint. The metallic taste is constant now, 14 months constant. You no longer remember what your mouth tasted like before you started this job. $22 per week. Your family's rent is $18 per month. Your father's textile mill wage covers food, barely. Your wage covers rent, and the margin between survival and eviction. The calculation is clear. The calculation has been clear since the day you accepted this position. Tomorrow morning at 8 o'clock, Dr. Flynn arrives with his examination forms, his medical credentials, his corporate consulting contracts that depend on every girl in this room being diagnosed with something other than radium poisoning. Tonight you have to decide whether your jaw matters more than your family's rent. The supervisor walks past again. You don't look up. Your brush moves steadily. Dip, paint, set aside. 781. 782. The factory floor hum is constant. 40 girls. 40 brushes. The tick of thousands of watch mechanisms in the assembly room next door. The sound layers into something almost rhythmic, almost musical, if you stop hearing it as individual components, and let it become one continuous note. Your jaw aches. You paint. You conduct your inventory while painting, memorizing symptoms the way you memorize dial numbers. Molly Magia, 2nd row, 6th position, 3 loosened teeth, visible gap when she smiles, gum recession that has progressed from barely noticeable in February to obvious in May. She touches her jaw between dial completions, a habit so constant she no longer seems aware of it. Catherine Schaub, 1st row, 2nd position, jaw pain she hides by chewing on the left side only, movement so subtle you only caught it by watching her during lunch break for 3 consecutive days. Quinta MacDonald, 4th row, 1st position, limp that appeared in April worsened to the point where she holds the table edge when standing, grips it hard enough that her knuckles go white. Dr. Flynn arrives in 7 hours. His examination forms are already printed. The diagnosis language is already written. Your signature is the only missing element. The radium powder feels gritty between your teeth each time you sharpen the brush. A texture that has become so familiar you no longer notice it until night, when you lie awake and your mouth still tastes of metal and adhesive sweetness mixed with something else, something underneath, something wrong. Your own jaw aches with a wrongness that has nothing to do with the 3 extractions. The dentist stopped cutting halfway through the 3rd procedure. He set down the instruments and used tweezers instead, lifting fragments of bone out piece by piece. And he didn't explain why, but you understood anyway. The bone was too soft to cut, it crumbled. You add your own name to the census you are building in silence. Hazel Kusa, 3rd row, 9th position, wrist swelling, paints with left hand now, has not reported symptoms because reporting symptoms leads to termination. Edna Hussman, 2nd row, 3rd position, fatigue that has progressed from occasional to constant, sometimes leans against the work table between dial completions, straightens immediately when supervisors approach. Albina Larice, 1st row, 7th position, tooth extracted last week, healing poorly, keeps touching the extraction site with her tongue in a way that mirrors your own habit exactly. 11 days until Catherine Wiley arrives. You count which girls will still be employed by then, which will have been terminated for symptoms, which will have been diagnosed with venereal disease by Dr. Flynn, and disqualified from federal testimony through the precision of corporate medicine that carries Columbia University credentials and appears in the Journal of Industrial Hygiene under his name. The diagnosis doesn't have to be true, it only has to be documented. You paint numeral after numeral. The glow coats your fingers, your palms, the cuffs of your sleeves. Phosphorescent. Permanent. At night your bedroom glows faintly green from your work clothes draped over the chair. Your father asked once why your hands glow in the dark. You told him the powder is harmless. The company says so. Mr. Rhoda says so. Dr. Flynn will say so tomorrow, in medical language that carries the weight of Columbia University credentials and 43 years of professional reputation, that depends on you signing the consent form without reading the pre-printed diagnosis. The girl beside you paints in silence. Everyone paints in silence. The factory floor hum is constant, but the human voices are sparse, occasional, functional. Pass the adhesive. Tray is full. Count check. Nobody mentions the examination tomorrow. Nobody mentions the notice on the door. Nobody mentions that 3 girls are absent today, their stations empty, their dial quotas redistributed among the remaining workers. You paint faster to compensate. 800 dials per day. The quota does not adjust for absent workers. The remaining girls simply paint more. Your jaw throbs. The bone beneath your tongue feels soft, yielding, wrong. You press the brush tip between your lips and sharpen the point. Dr. Frederick Flynn arrives at 7:58, 2 minutes early, carrying a leather medical bag in his left hand and a stack of examination forms already clipped to boards in his right. The boards are walnut-stained wood, expensive enough to suggest institutional authority, and the forms on top are printed on cream paper with the Columbia University seal in the upper corner. He sets the bag on the floor beside the converted storage closet that serves as examination room, and the forms on the wooden chair that serves as waiting area furniture. You watch from your painting station, brush tip between your lips, while Molly McGeer is called first. She stands from her stool without speaking, sets her brush in the adhesive jar, and walks to the examination room door. The door closes behind her. The factory floor continues its mechanical hum, 40 brushes dipping and painting, the rhythm unchanged by what is happening in the room where the window faces the loading dock, and the walls are thin enough that you can hear the murmur of questions, but not their content. Molly does not return to her painting station. 18 minutes pass. You count them against the number of dials you complete. 34 numerals finished while she is inside. And when the door opens, Molly walks directly to the coat hooks by the factory entrance, retrieves her lunch pail and coat, and leaves through the side door without looking at anyone. Her stool sits empty. The girl beside it continues painting. You continue painting. The mathematics of survival do not permit pausing to acknowledge what has just been documented. The second girl is called at 8:23. The same sequence. Door closing, murmur of voices, door opening, coat and lunch pail, departure through the side exit. Her stool remains empty for the rest of the shift. By 9 o'clock, 3 stools are empty. By 10 o'clock, 5. The spaces where girls sat this morning now show only the wear patterns on the wooden seats, and the adhesive stains on the tables beside them. Through the window behind your station you can see Dr. Flynn's automobile parked in the visitor space, its chrome polished, its paint unweathered. The car of a man whose 43 years have included neither factory work nor the consequences of factory work. Your name is called at 10:37. You set your brush in the jar and walk to the examination room. The converted storage closet still smells of cleaning solvent and dust, overlaid now with the leather smell of Dr. Flynn's medical bag. One window lets in morning light. One examination table covered in paper. One wooden chair. Dr. Flynn stands beside the table, writing on a form. He does not look up when you enter. Close the door, he says. You close it. The factory hum becomes muffled. Your jaw throbs in the sudden quiet. Sit on the table. You sit. The paper crinkles. Dr. Flynn continues writing for another 10 seconds, finishing whatever notation he began before you entered, then sets the clipboard aside and turns to face you. His eyes are gray. His collar is starched. His hands, when he steps forward to examine you, are cold. He palpates your jaw, pressing the soft places where bones should be hard. His fingers find the tender spot above your left canine, the place where your dentist extracted the tooth last month and the socket has not healed. You inhale sharply. Dr. Flynn's expression does not change. He presses harder, probing the depression, then moves to the right side where the bone has begun to feel hollow when you chew. Open your mouth. You open it. He examines your gums, your remaining teeth, the roof of your mouth. He does not use a tongue depressor. He does not ask you to say, ah. He looks, nods once and steps back. You may close your mouth. You close it. The ache where he pressed continues, a deep throb that radiates into your skull. Dr. Flynn picks up the clipboard and writes for 45 seconds. You can see the form from where you sit. Patient symptoms is printed at the top of one section. Diagnosis is printed at the top of another. The diagnosis section is already filled out in printed type, complete sentences in professional medical language, before he has spoken a single question about your symptoms. Dr. Flynn's examination forms have space for patient symptoms and detailed diagnosis, and the diagnosis section is already filled out in printed type before he touches you. Efficient medicine. He sets the clipboard down and faces you again. Have you engaged in immoral behavior, he asks. The question is stated in the same tone he used to tell you to sit, clinical and flat, as though asking whether you experience headaches or nausea. No, you say. He writes on the form, have you consorted with multiple men? No. More writing. Do you understand that jaw necrosis is a known symptom of advanced syphilis? You understand that he is not diagnosing. You understand that he is documenting. You understand that every answer you give will be entered into a medical record that will follow you to any future legal proceeding, any insurance claim, any federal investigation that might require testimony about working conditions at United States Radium Corporation. I do not have syphilis, you say. Dr. Flynn writes this down as well, his pen moving in steady strokes across the symptoms section. The medical evidence suggests otherwise, he says. Jaw deterioration of this nature is consistent with tertiary syphilis. The differential diagnosis is quite clear. I paint watch dials with radium powder, you say. I put the brush tip between my lips 50 times per shift. 40 girls in this factory have the same symptoms. Correlation does not establish causation, Dr. Flynn says. He continues writing. The simultaneous presentation of similar symptoms in multiple individuals suggests infectious disease transmission, not occupational exposure. Radium has been thoroughly studied and presents no health risk to workers when proper hygiene is maintained. You sit on the paper-covered table and watch him write. The examination is complete. The diagnosis was complete before you entered the room. What remains is the documentation process, the conversion of your jaw pain and missing teeth into medical language that will protect the company from liability and disqualify you from Catherine Wiley's investigation in 10 days. Dr. Flynn finishes writing and looks up. You may return to your station, he says. You do not move. What did you write on the form? That is confidential medical information, he says. The company will receive a copy of my findings. If you wish to contest the diagnosis, you may seek independent medical evaluation at your own expense. Independent medical evaluation costs more than you earn in a month. Catherine Wiley arrives in 10 days. Dr. Flynn's diagnosis, once entered into your employment file, will be the only medical documentation the federal investigator sees. You stand from the table. The paper crinkles. Your jaw throbs. You walk to the door, open it and step back into the factory floor, where 35 girls continue painting and 5 stools sit empty. Your stool is still occupied. Your brush is still in the adhesive jar where you left it. You sit down and resume painting. 10 days until Catherine Wiley arrives, and Dr. Flynn's forms are already documenting which girls can be legally terminated for moral turpitude, before a federal investigator asks why so many dial painters have jaw necrosis. Dr. Flynn calls you back to the examination room at 2:45, after lunch. After you have painted 300 more numerals with a brush tip you sharpen between your lips because that is how precision work is done, when dials are smaller than dimes and quotas are 800 per day. You set your brush down and walk to the door. The room smells the same. The paper on the examination table has been replaced. Dr. Flynn stands beside the wooden chair, holding a single sheet of paper. "Sit," he says, gesturing to the table. You sit. The fresh paper crinkles. Dr. Flynn steps forward and slides the paper across the examination table. It makes a whisper sound against the wood. The paper is heavier than standard office stock, cream-colored, with printed text in small type, and 3 signature lines at the bottom. "This is a consent form," he says. "It permits me to share my medical findings with the company, with insurance investigators, with any future legal proceedings that might require expert testimony about your condition." You read the first paragraph. The language is dense, full of subordinate clauses and medical terminology, but the meaning is clear. By signing, you acknowledge that Dr. Flynn has examined you, and that his diagnosis is accurate. The second paragraph grants permission for him to disclose his findings to United States Radium Corporation and any affiliated parties. The third paragraph confirms that you understand the nature of your condition and do not hold the company responsible for any pre-existing medical issues. The form has 3 signature lines, 1 labeled Patient Acknowledgement, 1 labeled Consent to Disclosure, 1 labeled Voluntary Waiver of Claims. Dr. Flynn holds out a pen. The cap is already removed. You read each paragraph again slowly. The consent form makes no mention of radium exposure. No reference to lip-dip paint technique. No acknowledgement that 40 girls in this factory have the same symptoms. The language treats your jaw necrosis as an individual medical condition, unrelated to occupational circumstances, requiring only your acknowledgement and waiver. Your jaw throbs as you hold the pen Dr. Flynn has placed in your hand. The ache spreads into your teeth and up into your skull, the same deep pain that wakes you at night and makes chewing difficult, and will not improve, because the bone beneath your gums is softening from the inside. The third signature line, you say, "What does voluntary waiver mean?" It confirms you understand that refusing to sign constitutes voluntary termination, effective immediately, Dr. Flynn says. His voice remains clinical. Company policy requires employee cooperation with medical examinations. Refusal to sign indicates unwillingness to maintain employment standards. You set the pen down on the examination table. "If I sign, can I still speak to the federal investigator?" Catherine Wiley's inspection is unrelated to individual medical diagnoses, Dr. Flynn says. However, any testimony you provide would be evaluated in light of documented medical conditions. A diagnosis of tertiary syphilis would, of course, raise questions about credibility regarding other claimed symptoms. You pick up the pen again. Your hand does not shake. Your family's rent is $17 per month. Your father earns $8 per week at the textile mill. Your wages are $22 per week, and without them, your family loses housing. You calculate whether signing disqualifies you from testifying, or whether refusing to sign means Catherine Wiley will arrive in 10 days to find you already terminated and unavailable for interview. The arithmetic is clear. If you refuse to sign, you lose employment today. If you sign, you remain employed, but your testimony becomes worthless because Dr. Flynn's diagnosis precedes any statement you make about radium exposure. Either way, Catherine Wiley's investigation proceeds without your voice. You read the third paragraph one more time. The language is precise. Voluntary waiver of claims. Not just current claims, any future claims. Signing means you cannot sue, cannot testify, cannot contradict the company's medical documentation. Not signing means you cannot feed your family. Dr. Flynn waits with the patience of someone who has conducted this same examination 20 times today, who will conduct it 20 more times tomorrow, whose stack of consent forms is thick enough to document every girl in the factory before Catherine Wiley arrives, to inspect working conditions that will appear entirely normal, because everyone who could testify otherwise has been diagnosed with venereal disease, and terminated or rendered legally silent. You set the pen down again. How many girls have signed today? That is confidential, Dr. Flynn says. How many girls are still employed? Company staffing decisions are not my concern. He picks up the clipboard from the chair. I have documented your examination findings. Whether you choose to cooperate with company medical policy is your decision. I have 14 more examinations to complete today. The paper sits on the examination table between you and Dr. Flynn. 3 signature lines. Your jaw throbs. Through the thin walls, you hear the factory floor continuing its mechanical rhythm. Brushes dipping and painting. Girls working who have already made their calculation and signed their forms, and returned to their stations to paint 800 dials per day until their jaws deteriorate enough that they can no longer hold brush tips between their lips. Catherine Wiley arrives in 10 days. If you are still employed then, your testimony will be evaluated against Dr. Flynn's diagnosis of tertiary syphilis. If you are not employed, you cannot testify at all. The calculation permits only the question of which outcome destroys you more slowly. You pick up the pen for the third time. Your hand remains steady. You sign the first line, patient acknowledgement. You sign the second line, consent to disclosure. You pause at the third line, voluntary waiver of claims. Dr. Flynn watches without expression. The pen rests against the paper. Your signature on the first 2 lines is already binding. The third line is the one that severs any future legal recourse. That converts your jaw pain into a pre-existing condition unrelated to employment. That protects United States Radium Corporation from liability, by documenting your voluntary agreement, that the company bears no responsibility for symptoms you developed while painting their dials with their radium powder using their mandated technique. You sign the third line. Your handwriting is clear and legible. Dr. Flynn takes the form, countersigns as witness, and places it in his medical bag. You may return to your station, he says. You stand from the table. The paper crinkles one final time. You walk to the door, open it, and step back into the factory floor, where 30 girls continue painting and 10 stools sit empty. Your stool is where you left it. Your brush is in the adhesive jar. You sit down and resume painting numerals smaller than pinheads, while 10 days count down to Catherine Wiley's arrival, and your signed consent form sits in Dr. Flynn's medical bag, converting your testimony into evidence of moral failure before you have the opportunity to speak at all. The break room holds 12 girls at lunch. 9 eat normally. 3 take only liquids because chewing has become difficult. Nobody mentions that Molly's chair is empty, or that she left through the side door this morning with her coat and has not returned. You eat soup. The cafeteria serves it every day. Vegetable broth with soft carrots and potatoes that require no real chewing. You used to bring sandwiches from home. You stopped 3 weeks ago when biting into bread made your jaw ache for hours afterward. The girl beside you drinks milk. Her name is Edna Hussman. She is 19. Her jaw clicks when she opens her mouth wide enough to tilt the glass. She drinks slowly, in small sips, and does not speak. The company safety manual sits on the shelf beside the coffee pot. You have seen it there every day for 14 months, but never opened it. The cover proclaims United States Radium Corporation Safety First, above an illustration of a smiling dial painter whose teeth are drawn with impossible whiteness, each tooth perfect and even. The kind of illustration made by someone who has never watched a girl's canine loosen and fall out during lunch. You set your soup bowl down and walk to the shelf. The manual is bound in green cloth, the spine still crisp because nobody reads it. You pull it down and return to your chair. Edna glances at the manual but says nothing. The other girls continue eating or drinking. The clock on the wall shows 12:22. Lunch ends at 12:30. You open the manual to the first page. Introduction to Safe Radium Handling Practices. The text is printed in formal language with section headings and numbered paragraphs. Section 1. Properties of Radium. Section 2. Health Considerations. Section 3. Workplace Hygiene Standards. You page to Section 2. The text reads, Radium has been thoroughly studied by leading medical authorities and presents no health risk to workers when proper hygiene is maintained. The luminescent properties that make radium valuable for precision dial work are entirely harmless. Workers should be reassured that radium exposure in industrial applications has been documented as safe by the United States Bureau of Labor Standards. You read it twice. The language is authoritative. The conclusion is definitive. Radium is harmless. You turn to Section 3. Workplace Hygiene Standards. Paragraph 3.1. Workers must wash hands thoroughly before consuming food or beverages. Paragraph 3.2. Work surfaces should be wiped clean at the end of each shift. Paragraph 3.3. Protective aprons are available upon request for workers concerned about clothing contamination. The company safety manual lists radium as harmless and requires workers to wash hands before lunch. The manual does not explain how washing removes what you have already swallowed 50 times per shift. You close the manual and set it on the table. Edna is still drinking milk, her jaw clicking with each swallow. Across the table, another girl eats soup with a spoon, her movements careful and deliberate. 2 chairs away, a girl who started last month bites into an apple, her teeth are still intact, she chews normally. You count the girls in the break room, 12 present. The factory employs 47 dial painters total. 12 at lunch means 35 are either working through lunch or no longer employed. You subtract the number who typically eat at their stations, 8 girls who prefer to maximize painting time, and arrive at 27 currently working. 20 girls unaccounted for, some terminated this morning after Dr. Flynn's examination, some sick at home, some already departed through the side door with coats and lunch pails, calculating that unemployment is preferable to signing consent forms that diagnose jaw necrosis as venereal disease. You memorize which girls are present: Edna, with the clicking jaw; Grace Fryer, who drinks only broth; Catherine Schaub with the loose incisor; Hazel Konzer, who still chews solid food but touches her jaw between bites when she thinks nobody is watching; Albina Larice, who signed her consent form this morning and returned to her station without speaking; Quinta MacDonald, who refused examination and was escorted to the factory office to collect final wages. 10 days until Catherine Wiley's inspection. The federal investigator will tour the facility, observe working conditions, interview current employees about safety practices. The company safety manual will be available for her review. Its green cloth cover pristine. Its authoritative text confirming that radium presents no health risk when proper hygiene is maintained. The girls she interviews will be the ones still employed, the ones who signed consent forms, who accepted drive, Flynn's diagnoses, who agreed in writing that their jaw necrosis resulted from moral failures unrelated to occupational exposure. The clock shows 12:28. You return the safety manual to the shelf beside the coffee pot. The illustrated dial painter on the cover continues smiling with impossible teeth. You return to your chair and finish your soup. The broth is lukewarm, your jaw throbs with each swallow. Edna sets her empty milk glass down. Her jaw clicks one final time. She stands and walks back to the factory floor without speaking. The other girls follow, returning to their stations where brushes wait in adhesive jars and quotas wait to be filled, and Catherine Wiley's inspection waits 10 days in the future, too far away to matter and close enough that every girl still employed is calculating whether her jaw will last long enough to provide testimony that a federal investigator will believe over the medical documentation already compiled in Dr. Flynn's leather bag. You stand and walk back to your painting station. The factory floor smells of adhesive sweetness and machine oil. Your brush is where you left it. You sit on your stool, press the brush tip between your lips to sharpen the point, dip it in radium powder mixed with glue, and paint the next numeral on the next dial. Your jaw aches. Your count continues. 9 days, 23 hours, 37 minutes, until Catherine Wiley arrives to inspect a facility where the safety manual confirms radium is harmless, and the medical records confirm that jaw necrosis is a symptom of tertiary syphilis, and the girls who could testify otherwise have already been diagnosed, documented, and rendered legally silent through the precision of corporate medicine. The supervisor calls your name at 2:47 in the afternoon. Not a question. Not a request. Your name, your station number, and the instruction to bring nothing with you. You set your brush down. The paint on the bristles is still wet. 800 dials painted today, 300 before lunch, 500 since. Your hands do not shake. They have not shaken in 14 months of brush tipping, and they will not shake now because trembling is evidence of nerves. And nerves suggest guilt, and guilt is what Dr. Flynn's examination this morning was designed to document. The supervisor's desk is positioned near the factory floor's east windows, where natural light makes reading easy and saves the company 2 cents per day in electrical costs. The letter is already there when you arrive. White paper. Company letterhead. United States Radium Corporation in serif type across the top. Your name below that spelled correctly. Read it, the supervisor says. You read it standing. The paper is still warm from the typewriter. The ink has not yet fully dried. You can see the slight sheen where the keys struck heaviest on the capital letters. Dated today. Signed by Arthur Roeder himself. Factory president. The signature executed in fountain pen, with the confident loops of someone who has signed many termination letters, and expects to sign many more. Your employment is terminated effective immediately due to moral turpitude and communicable disease presenting risk to fellow workers. You read it twice. The second time does not change the words. You'll need to sign the acknowledgement form, the supervisor says. She slides a second paper across the desk. Company policy requires written confirmation of receipt. The acknowledgement form is shorter, 3 sentences. By signing below, I confirm that I have received notice of termination, that I understand the reasons stated therein, and that I accept said termination as valid and final, with no claims against United States Radium Corporation for wrongful dismissal, workplace injury, or related compensation. You do not touch the pen she offers. I haven't accepted anything, you say. The termination isn't contingent on your acceptance. The form is procedural documentation. Then document that I refuse to sign. The supervisor's expression does not change. She has had this conversation before. Probably this morning. Possibly with 3 other girls whose names you will learn at shift end when you discover who else is missing from the painting floor. Unsigned termination letters are filed as voluntary resignation, she says, which disqualifies you from unemployment compensation and from any future legal claim against the company for workplace injury. If you sign, you preserve your right to appeal within 30 days. If you don't sign, The company records that you walked out mid-shift without notice. Your jaw aches. It has been aching since the extractions 3 weeks ago, but the pain is different now, deeper and duller, and located in the bone itself rather than the teeth that are no longer there. Dr. Flynn's fingers this morning found the soft places where bone should be hard, and his notes recorded inflammation consistent with spirochaetal infection rather than radium necrosis. And now this letter exists as the logical conclusion of an examination that was never diagnostic but accusatory. You do not sign. You walk back to your painting station at 2:51. 4 other girls watch without speaking. Quinta MacDonald's hands are still. Grace Fryer's brush hovers above her dial. The supervisor makes a notation in the logbook kept at her desk for recording insubordination and voluntary departures. You paint 800 dials before shift end. Not 799. Not 801. Exactly 800, because precision matters. Because continuing to work after termination notice proves you were not too ill to perform your duties. Because Catherine Wiley will need evidence of girls who were fired for symptoms not incompetence. Your hands glow green in the dimming afternoon light. They have glowed for 14 months. They will glow for 1600 years after you stop painting entirely. After the company closes. After everyone who signed termination letters and everyone who refused them has been dead for generations. 9 days until Catherine Wiley's inspection. You count them while painting numerals smaller than pinheads, while the unsigned termination letter sits in the supervisor's filing cabinet, while your jaw aches with the deep wrongness of bone turning soft from the inside. The factory newsletter arrives at shift end, distributed by the same supervisor who delivered termination letters at mid-afternoon. 4 pages printed on cheap paper, folded once. The masthead reads the radium dial in ornamental script with a small illustration of a glowing watch face where the eye would be. You take your copy. Everyone takes their copy. This is not optional. The newsletter is evidence of company culture and worker appreciation, and refusing your copy would be noted in the same logbook that now contains your unsigned termination acknowledgement. The front page features photographs. 6 dial painters pose near the factory windows, smiling, holding their glowing hands toward the camera. The exposure is long enough to capture the phosphorescent trails their fingertips leave in darkness, green arcs of light that frame their faces like halos. The caption reads, "Our ghost girls, the luminous beauty that makes our painters the most sought-after companions at factory social events." You recognize 3 of the girls in the photograph. One is Hazel Kusa. She died in March. The article continues below the photographs in 2 columns of enthusiastic prose. Our dial painters carry their work home with them, lighting up dance floors and drawing admiring attention wherever they appear. The radium glow is harmless and temporary, fading naturally after exposure to fresh air and sunlight. Many girls report that their enhanced luminosity increases their social opportunities and prospects for matrimony. The factory newsletter celebrates dial painters as ghost girls, whose luminous beauty attracts suitors. The suitors are not mentioned in the section about funeral expenses. That section appears on page 4 in small type beneath advertisements for company-sponsored life insurance. The rates are competitive. $3 per month for $500 coverage, payable to designated beneficiaries upon proof of death. Terms and conditions apply. Pre-existing conditions excluded. Moral turpitude clauses enforced. You fold the newsletter into your coat pocket. The paper is thin enough that it crumples easily. Dr. Flynn's examination forms are already filed downtown. 43 years old, Columbia University credentials. Medical testimony that will follow you to every future employer, every insurance application, every courtroom where you might try to speak. Outside, the street is dark, but you do not need the gas lamps to see your hands. They glow green through your gloves. They have glowed through your gloves since October. Grace Fryer walks beside you for 2 blocks without speaking. Her hands glow too. So do Quinta MacDonald's and Catherine Schaub's and Edna Hussman's. and Albina Larices. 14 girls leave the factory with green hands. 3 of them received termination letters today. You count them while walking. Memorizing who remains employed. Who will still be present when Catherine Wiley arrives in 9 days. The newsletter in your pocket describes luminous beauty and matrimonial prospects. It does not describe jaw necrosis or bone softening, or the precise medical language Dr. Flynn used this morning to document symptoms that look like radium poisoning, but will be legally recorded as venereal disease. You walk home in darkness that is not complete darkness. Your hands light your way. 1600 years from now they will still be lighting something. Your bedroom is dark but not dark. You have turned off the gas lamp and drawn the curtains, but your hands glow green against the bedsheet where you rest them on the blanket. Phosphorescent handprints mark the pillow where you adjusted it before lying down. The blanket edge shows the ghost of your grip from last night and the night before, and every night since September, when the glow stopped being something that washed off and became something that stays. You lie awake. Not because sleep will not come, but because counting requires consciousness, and there are things that must be counted before Catherine Wiley arrives in 9 days. The dress you wore to work hangs on the door hook. It glows faintly in the darkness, not the whole dress, but specific spots where radium powder has settled into the fabric over 14 months of brush tipping. A constellation of luminous marks that map your technique. Chest level, where you lean forward over the workbench. Right shoulder where you rest your arm. Lap where you set your brush down between dials. The dress will remain radioactive longer than Arthur Roeder will remain alive, longer than the factory will remain standing, longer than anyone who saw you wear it will remember your name. Your jaw throbs. Deep ache that has nothing to do with the 3 extractions Dr. Harrison removed 2 weeks ago when he stopped cutting and simply lifted bone fragments out with tweezers, because the bone had gone soft enough to crumble. You press your tongue against the inside of your jaw where the teeth used to be. The bone yields slightly. Not the way gum tissue yields, but the way something solid has become less solid, the way marble becomes chalk under pressure. You add this observation to your mental census. Which girls have been fired? 3 today, 2 last week, 4 the week before Dr. Flynn's examination. Which have been diagnosed with syphilis? 7 written diagnoses delivered on company letterhead, signed by Dr. Flynn, filed in company medical records that will be discoverable in court if Raymond Berry can keep you alive long enough to testify. Which have died? Molly Magia in September, Hazel Kuze in March, 2 others whose names you are still learning. Which are still painting dials with mouths full of radium, because $22 per week is triple what their fathers earn in the textile mills, and rent must be paid regardless of bone softness or jaw pain, or phosphorescent handprints on bedroom pillows. 9 days until Catherine Wiley arrives to inspect workplace safety conditions at a facility where the safety manual states that radium powder is harmless and temporary, where the factory newsletter celebrates ghost girls and their luminous beauty, where termination letters cite moral turpitude instead of radiation poisoning. Dr. Flynn will have completed 14 more examinations by then. Morning appointments scheduled at 15-minute intervals. Medical forms already printed with diagnosis language that protects United States Radium Corporation from every liability claim you are counting in this dark room. You rehearse testimony in darkness. Your hands glow green on the blanket. The dress glows on its hook. The pillow shows the mark of your head from last night's rehearsal and the night before that. 14 months of brush tipping. 50 times per shift. Brush tip between lips to sharpen the point. 750 working days. 37,500 times you have put radium in your mouth. Because that is how precision work is done, and precision work pays $22 per week. And $22 per week means your family eats. The calculation is simple. The half-life of radium-226 is 1600 years. You are 17 years old. Your jaw is softening from the inside. Catherine Wiley arrives in 9 days. The testimony you are rehearsing in this dark room, lit only by your own hands, will need to be delivered before your jaw crumbles entirely, and you lose the ability to speak at all. You do not know how many days that gives you. Dr. Flynn's examination recorded spirochetal infection, not radiation necrosis. The unsigned termination letter in the supervisor's filing cabinet documents moral turpitude, not workplace injury. The factory newsletter describes luminous beauty and increased prospects for matrimony. Your hands glow green against the blanket. You count 9 days and rehearse testimony and press your tongue against bone that should be hard but is not. And you understand with absolute clarity that the company is not going to stop any of this. That Catherine Wiley's inspection is the only chance to document what 14 months of glowing in the dark actually costs. And that every day between now and her arrival is a day in which more evidence can be destroyed, more girls can be fired, more medical records can be revised to cite venereal disease instead of radium poisoning. 9 days. You count them in the darkness of your bedroom, where your hands light the blanket and your dress glows on its hook, and your jaw aches with the deep wrongness of bone dissolving from the inside, while the company newsletter celebrates the luminous beauty that makes ghost girls so desirable at factory social events. The morning newspaper is posted on the factory bulletin board, folded open to an article about Dr. Flynn's testimony before the New Jersey Department of Labor. You read while other girls file past to their painting stations in silence that has become standard morning routine since Monday's terminations. The article runs beneath a photograph of Dr. Flynn in academic robes. He testified that radium provides health benefits and cites his own research funded by the company currently being sued, which Dr. Flynn does not consider a conflict because the money was paid through Columbia University first, as though institutional laundering purifies corporate interest. The article quotes him stating that jaw necrosis among dial painters is caused by poor dental hygiene and venereal disease, not radium exposure. That his examinations have found no evidence of industrial poisoning, despite the fact that your bones glow bright enough to expose photographic film in complete darkness. You memorize the paragraph, word for word, the way you memorize which numerals go where on military dials, which require precision to 1/16 of an inch. Documentation matters when testimony is written in bone. Behind you, Catherine Schaub from the morning shift touches her jaw while reading. Holds her hand there for 3 seconds before dropping it back to her side. You count 8 days until Catherine Wiley's federal inspection. You build your census while standing at the bulletin board. Which girls are reading the article twice? Which are touching their jaws while reading? Which walk past as though the bulletin board does not exist? 3 read twice. 5 touch their jaws. 11 walk past without stopping. The supervisor calls shift start at 8:15. You move to your painting station and sharpen your brush between your lips, the motion automatic after 14 months. The metallic taste coats your tongue. You dip in radium powder mixed with adhesive. Paint the first numeral of the morning. Around you, 18 girls do the same. The factory floor fills with the quiet sound of brush tips being sharpened, the slight wet noise of paint meeting watch dial surface, the tick of finished dials being set aside. You count 800 dials per day, calculate which girls will still be painting when the federal investigator arrives in 8 days. Factor in termination rate. Average jaw pain progression. The calculation is clear. The census narrows by 3 girls per week. At this rate, 12 painters remain by inspection day. 12 testimonies against medical findings purchased through Columbia University letterhead. Grace Fryer worked this station before you. Before her jaw broke during a dental extraction. Before she hired Raymond Berry as legal counsel. Her brush cup still sits on the shelf above your workspace, unwashed, the bristles crusted with dried radium compound that glows faintly when the overhead lights dim during the lunch hour power reduction. The light through the factory windows shifts as morning progresses. Your hands glow faintly even in brightness. 50 brush tips to your lips so far. 400 more before lunch. Outside, a truck engine idles at the loading dock. The sound carries across the factory floor. Diesel exhaust and the metallic clang of crates being unloaded. Fresh radium powder from the processing facility in Denver. The shipment manifest will document quantity and isotopic purity. Then, vanish into filing cabinets that empty every third month, when papers are burned in the furnace behind the building. You paint numeral after numeral. Your jawbone aches with the steady pressure that means the infection sites are spreading into healthy bone. The pain sharpens when you press your tongue to the inside of your mouth, testing the places where extraction wounds have failed to heal for 11 weeks. 8 days. The number sits behind every numeral you paint. Your jaw aches with increasing intensity as morning progresses. The pain spreads from the extraction sites into the bone beneath, deeper than yesterday, sharper than the day before. You press your tongue against the inside of your lower jaw to feel the wrongness that has been developing for weeks, but has accelerated since Dr. Flynn's examination 3 days ago. The bone yields under pressure, not hard like bone should be, like soft clay pressed between fingers. You hold your tongue there for 5 seconds. Test the give. The radium is dissolving your skeleton from inside, while you paint dials that will glow for 1600 years after your body has finished crumbling. Around you the other girls paint in silence, brush tip between lips, dip in radium powder, paint numerals smaller than pinheads. The motion continues across 18 stations, the sound of precision work being done by bodies that are actively disintegrating. You continue painting. Your hands know the work without instruction now. Brush sharpening has become reflex. You do not need to think about technique anymore, which means you can think about other things while working. Like how the bone in your jaw moves when you press it with your tongue. Like how that movement was not possible 6 weeks ago. Like how Dr. Flynn's examination forms already have syphilis diagnosis language pre-printed in the medical history section, blanks waiting to be filled with symptoms that match radium necrosis exactly, but will be recorded as venereal disease for legal purposes. The supervisor walks between the rows at 9:30. His footsteps pause behind Quinta McDonald's station. 3 seconds of silence, then he continues walking. Quinta's hands do not stop moving. She paints the next dial. And the next. But her shoulders have changed position. Drawn forward. Protective. The posture of someone who has just been marked for tomorrow's termination list. You paint numeral after numeral. The metallic taste coats your tongue with each brush tipping. Your jawbone softens beneath. 8 days until Catherine Wiley's inspection. You calculate whether your jaw will hold together long enough to testify, or whether the bone will crumble entirely before the federal investigator sees what 14 months of glowing in the dark actually costs. The pain sharpens at mid-morning. You pause, set down your brush, press your hand to your jaw from the outside while pressing your tongue from the inside. The bone shifts. Actual movement, not pain interpretation, not imagination. Across the room, Hazel Kusa coughs twice into her handkerchief. When she pulls the cloth away, you see the dark spot before she folds it quickly and returns it to her pocket. Blood mixed with something else. Something that glows faintly green in the shadow beneath her workspace. The factory clock reads 10:15. Dr. Flynn's examination schedule runs Tuesday and Thursday mornings. Tomorrow he returns with his Columbia University credentials and his pre-printed diagnosis forms, and his published research stating that radium ingestion poses no health risk to workers who maintain proper dental hygiene. You pick up your brush, sharpen it between your lips, continue working. The census of who will testify requires you to stay employed. The census requires you to reach day 8 without termination. The arithmetic is clear. Terminated girls cannot testify. Dead girls cannot testify. Girls too sick to stand cannot testify. You must be conscious. You must be employed. You must have a jaw capable of forming words when Catherine Wiley arrives. Currently you have 2 of 3. Working on the 3rd. The morning light angles through the windows, illuminating dust particles that glow faintly green in the air above the painting stations. Radium powder made airborne by 18 girls. Breathing. You inhale it with every breath. It settles in your lungs, your throat, the soft tissue of your mouth where brush tipping has abraded the mucous membranes into permanent lesions that will not heal because the wounds themselves are radioactive. 8 days. The number holds. The break room conversation is quiet today because 3 more girls have been terminated since Monday. Their chairs sit empty. The remaining painters eat lunch with the careful silence of people who understand that discussing symptoms leads to diagnosis, which leads to termination before federal inspection. You eat bread slowly. Chewing has become difficult, the soft parts only. Catherine Schaub sits across from you. She mentions that her lawyer requested X-ray films of her jaw. Her voice stays low, not quite a whisper, but near it. The films glow in darkness, she says. Because the radium concentration in her bones is high enough to expose photographic plates without external light source, turning her skeleton into self-documenting evidence. You stop chewing. They glow. In complete darkness, Catherine says. The doctor put them in a light-proof box, came back an hour later. The film had exposed itself. Around the table, 4 other girls have stopped eating, listening without appearing to listen. The technique of information gathering in a room where information leads to termination. Catherine continues eating her sandwich, speaking between bites. The company lawyer asked whether I could prove the radium came from their factory specifically. You wait. The silence has weight. My bones glow in X-rays with the exact isotopic signature of their product, Catherine says. But proof requires documentation they have already burned in the furnace behind the loading dock, where ash still glows faintly green on windless nights. Someone at the end of the table makes a sound. Not quite a laugh, something between acknowledgement and exhaustion. You memorize what Catherine said. Word for word. Self-exposing X-rays, isotopic signature, evidence written into bone with half-life longer than human memory. Albina Larice sets down her cup of water with precise care. My dentist kept the bone fragments, she says, voice barely audible, from the extraction. Put them in a specimen jar. They glow bright enough to read by at night. The information passes through the room without comment. You file it with the rest. Census of evidence. Census of testimony. Census of which proof can be destroyed by corporate lawyers, and which proof lives in bone that will glow for 16 centuries after the company has dissolved and the factory has been demolished, and Newark itself has been rebuilt on top of the radioactive dust we leave behind. Edna Hussman pushes her plate away. Half her sandwich remains uneaten. 7 days, she says. Not a question. Confirmation of the count you have all been maintaining since Catherine Wiley's inspection date was announced. 7 days, you repeat. Molly Magyer's sister worked this factory before the jaw necrosis killed her in 18 months. Molly died in September. Her bones glow through her coffin walls. The cemetery groundskeeper reported it to the health department, who reported it to the company, who reported nothing further, because documentation of glowing graves creates legal liability that can be avoided through silence and systematic record destruction. You finish your bread, return to the factory floor. Sharpen your brush between your lips, and continue painting, while mentally cataloguing which girls heard Catherine's testimony about self-exposing X-rays. Which girls will remember when the federal investigator asks, what proof exists that radium came from this specific factory? The answer is, proof that cannot be destroyed by corporate document burning, proof that exposes itself in darkness, proof measured in bone density and isotopic decay. Outside the window, a car pulls into the parking area reserved for management and consulting physicians. You recognize the vehicle. Dr. Flynn arrives a day early. His leather medical bag visible through the windshield. The examination forms inside that bag already have diagnosis codes filled in, waiting only for names and dates to make the fiction official. You paint 800 dials per day. Your skeleton documents every single one. The afternoon light slants through the factory windows at the angle that means 2 o'clock. 5 hours of work remaining. Your jaw throbs with the steady pain that has become normal, the baseline against which you measure whether today is worse than yesterday. Today is worse. Tomorrow will be worse than today. The progression is mathematical, predictable, documented in bone that glows bright enough to expose photographic film in complete darkness. 7 days until Catherine Wiley's federal inspection arrives. You dip your brush in radium compound, sharpen the tip between your lips, paint the next numeral. And the next. The work continues because the work must continue. Because terminated girls cannot testify. Because the census requires you to remain employed until day 7 becomes day 0. And the federal investigator finally sees what corporate medical testimony has been systematically denying since the first dial painter's jaw began to crumble. The telegram arrives at 4 o'clock. You're painting dial number 417 when the delivery boy comes through the factory door, and you watch the supervisor cross the floor to meet him, watch her unfold the yellow paper, watch her read it twice before folding it into her desk drawer with movements that suggest she's handling evidence. She calls the shift together at 4:15, 23 painters still employed, down from 42 in January. You stand beside your station while she reads from a carbon copy, her voice carrying the neutral tone of someone delivering weather information. Catherine Wiley's federal inspection has been postponed 6 weeks due to scheduling conflicts with Department of Labor priorities. The new date is June 25th. All current safety procedures remain in effect. 6 weeks. 42 days. You calculate while she's still speaking. 42 days of painting dials, with a jaw that softens daily, bone becoming something closer to wet paper than calcium structure. 42 days during which Dr. Flynn maintains his consulting schedule at the factory, his examination forms already printed with syphilis diagnosis language, his published testimony in the Journal of Industrial Hygiene stating that radium poses no health risk to workers. 42 days during which every girl whose symptoms contradict his medical conclusions can be terminated and replaced with workers whose bodies haven't yet begun to document the actual cost of lip dip paint technique. The supervisor returns to her desk, the other painters return to their stations, the factory hum resumes as though nothing has changed. As though 6 weeks isn't enough time to eliminate every witness whose testimony might complicate corporate liability defense. You pick up your brush. Dip in radium powder mixed with adhesive. Bring the tip to your lips to sharpen the point, because precision work requires precision tools, and your mouth is the most precise tool the company provides. Paint numeral after numeral while memorizing which girls are still present. 23 painters today, yesterday 24, last week 27. Grace Fryer terminated 3 weeks ago when her limp became visible to factory visitors. Hazel Kuza hospitalized 2 weeks ago. Molly Magia dead since September, her jaw removed in sections before her burial. You build the census in memory, because written records are being destroyed systematically. Employment files disappearing from the supervisor's cabinet, at the same rate that symptomatic workers receive termination letters. The company is erasing documentation faster than bodies can decompose. Catherine Schaub at the station beside yours paints with careful movements, her brush hand steady despite the tremor that has developed in her left arm over the past month. Across the room, Edna Hussman works with gauze packed against her jaw where another tooth was extracted yesterday, the socket still weeping fluid that glows faintly green when she turns toward the window light. 3 girls have died since January, 7 hospitalized. 12 terminated for symptoms that Dr. Flynn documented as venereal disease rather than occupational poisoning. His examination forms carry the Columbia University letterhead, his medical degree providing institutional authority to testimony that protects corporate consulting contracts worth more than your collective wages. 4. Diagnosed with syphilis in medical examinations that lasted less than 15 minutes and resulted in signed consent forms that waive all future legal claims. The mathematics track themselves while you paint. Dial 418, 419, each numeral smaller than a pinhead, each requiring the brush tip sharpen technique that puts radium directly onto tongue tissue, directly into bloodstream, directly into bone marrow, where it will remain for 1600 years after your burial. 42 days until the federal investigator arrives. 42 days during which the company can continue systematic witness elimination. You paint and count and memorize, building evidence that exists only in memory because memory is the one record the company cannot access for destruction. The supervisor watches from her desk. Dr. Flynn's appointment calendar sits beside her telephone. You saw it this morning when delivering completed dial trays. His examination schedule runs through mid-June. Convenient timing that allows him to document every symptomatic worker as venereal case before federal inspection. You can feel her attention tracking across the room, monitoring which girls show symptoms, which move with increasing difficulty, which might become testimonial liabilities before June 25th. She's not cruel, she's practical. Employment decisions follow corporate legal strategy, and corporate legal strategy requires eliminating symptomatic witnesses before federal inspection. Your jaw aches. The pain has become constant now, a deep grinding sensation that suggests bone structure losing integrity from inside. You touched the area this morning and felt slight give, as though pressing against something softer than it should be. You didn't press again. 6 weeks. You paint dial after dial, while calculating whether you'll still be employed when Catherine Wiley finally arrives, whether your jaw will still be capable of forming testimony, whether you'll be alive at all, or added to the census of casualties whose attention-seeking has become permanent. The newspaper boy shouts headlines at the factory gates. You buy a copy, because Mr. Roda's name appears above the fold, and anything Mr. Roda says publicly requires documentation, even if that documentation exists only in memory. The letter occupies page 3, positioned between advertisements for tooth powder and life insurance. You read it standing at the corner while other workers flow past toward the streetcar stop. Do the editor of the Journal of Industrial Hygiene, *. Recent claims by former employees of the United States Radium Corporation regarding alleged occupational illness have no medical foundation. Extensive examination by qualified physicians has found no evidence of radium-related pathology. These individuals appear motivated by desire for financial compensation rather than legitimate health concerns. The corporation maintains highest safety standards, and any suggestion otherwise constitutes libel against our reputation. Sincerely, Ponsniple Arthur Roda, President. Mr. Roda writes a letter to the Journal of Industrial Hygiene, stating that former employees are simply seeking attention. 3 of them are dead. Their attention-seeking is permanent. You fold the newspaper into your coat pocket. The paper crinkles against the fabric, a sound that seems louder than it should be in the evening street noise. Your hands leave faint luminescent traces on the newsprint where you held it, green fingerprints documenting your attention-seeking, while Mr. Roda's words document his liability defense. Dr. Flynn's name appears in the letter's second paragraph. Qualified physicians means Columbia University consulting physicians, whose examination conclusions protect corporate clients from workers' compensation claims. His medical testimony will appear alongside Mr. Roda's denial when Catherine Wiley reads the published record 41 days from now. The streetcar arrives. You board with the other painters. none of whom mention the letter because mentioning the letter requires discussing why Mr. Roda felt compelled to publish denial in medical journals. Discussing that requires acknowledging what your glowing hands and deteriorating jaws actually mean. Catherine sits beside you. Her left arm tremor has worsened since this morning, small involuntary movements that make her reach for the support rail twice. She notices you noticing and tucks her hand into her coat pocket, where the movement becomes less visible. 41 days now, she says quietly. The streetcar lurches forward and she braces against the motion, until the inspection. You nod. The newspaper crinkles in your pocket. Mr. Roda's letter exists in published form now, permanent documentation of the company position. Former employees seeking attention, no medical evidence, highest safety standards, liable to suggest otherwise. 3 dead, 7 hospitalized, 12 terminated, 4 diagnosed with syphilis. These numbers exist in memory, while Mr. Roda's denial exists in print, while Dr. Flynn's examination forms accumulate in filing cabinets, while 41 days remain for the company to eliminate every witness whose testimony might contradict published medical conclusions. The streetcar moves through evening streets. You watch buildings slide past the window, each structure solid and permanent, while your jaw softens, and your colleagues disappear one by one from the factory floor. The attention you're seeking is the attention of staying alive long enough to testify when Catherine Wiley finally arrives for federal inspection. Your jaw aches with increasing intensity. The pain no longer comes in waves but maintains constant presence, like pressure applied from inside the bone structure. You touched it again during afternoon break and felt the same slight give, tissue that should be rigid, becoming something closer to sponge. 41 days. You calculate whether that's enough time for complete witness elimination. Whether the company can terminate or hospitalize every symptomatic painter before federal inspection. Whether Mr. Roda's published denial will stand as the only permanent record when all the attention seekers have been permanently silenced. The streetcar reaches your stop. You step down to the street where your gloves glow faintly in the dusklight, where your coat pocket holds a newspaper documenting corporate denial, where your jaw continues its steady deterioration while you count days until inspection, and hope that 41 is enough. Quinta MacDonald's station is empty when you arrive for morning shift. Her brush sits in the water cup where she left it yesterday, bristles slowly releasing yesterday's radium into liquid that glows faintly green. Her chair is pushed back at an angle that suggests she stood quickly, perhaps in pain, perhaps in response to sudden summons. You paint dial after dial while tracking the empty station in peripheral vision. The supervisor makes no announcement. The other painters don't ask. Asking leads to termination, and termination leads to unemployment, and unemployment leads to family eviction, because your wages keep roofs overhead and food on tables. Dr. Flynn's examination schedule continues, regardless of which stations sit empty, his medical forms ready to document any remaining symptomatic workers, before federal inspection arrives in 40 days. Catherine leans close during morning break. Hospital, she whispers, her jaw. You nod once. Your own jaw aches in sympathetic response. Bone structure that grows softer each day while you continue painting numerals smaller than pinheads. The lunch whistle sounds at noon. You sit with Catherine in the break room where 7 painters eat carefully, movements designed to minimize jaw pressure. 3 take only liquids. Chewing has become difficult when bone loses integrity. Eating breakfast, Catherine says quietly, her jaw fractured, just from chewing toast. The bone simply crumbled. You think about your morning meal, soft bread dipped in tea. You've been eating softer foods for weeks now without consciously acknowledging why. Emergency surgery. They're removing fragments. Catherine's hand tremors slightly around her cup. The pieces had started to rot inside her face, releasing infection into tissue that glows under examination lamp. The break room is quiet. 7 painters drinking soup and tea, avoiding solid food, avoiding conversation that names what's happening inside all your jaws simultaneously. The company calls it syphilis. Dr. Flynn's forms document moral turpitude, pre-printed diagnosis language that requires only patient signature and witness statement. Mr. Rhoda writes letters calling you attention seekers. Quinta's jaw fractured while eating breakfast. You return to your station. Quinta's chair remains at that angle, her brush still in the water cup, her absence documented only by empty space where she sat yesterday painting dials with the same technique you're using now. Brush tip to lips, sharpen the point, dip in radium powder, paint numerals that require precision you achieve by putting poison directly onto your tongue, 50 times per dial. 40 days, until Catherine Wiley arrives. 8 hospitalized now. You add Quinta to your mental census. Molly Maggia dead, Hazel Cusa hospitalized, Grace Fryer terminated, Albina Larice diagnosed with syphilis last week, Edna Hussman, working with gauze-packed jaw today. And yourself still painting, still employed, jaw softening daily but not yet fractured, not yet crumbled under the ordinary pressure of chewing solid food. The supervisor watches from her desk. You can feel her calculating which girls will become liability risks before federal inspection, which bodies will document occupational poisoning despite Dr. Flynn's syphilis diagnosis, which attention seekers need to be eliminated before Catherine Wiley's delayed arrival. Your jaw aches. You paint dial after dial, each numeral a small green number that will glow for 1600 years, while your bone structure continues its transformation from calcium to something softer, something that might fracture during breakfast, something that documents the actual cost of precision work regardless of what Mr. Rhoda publishes in medical journals. Quinta's empty chair, her abandoned brush, her crumbled jaw being surgically removed in some hospital while you sit at your station painting dials and counting days, and hoping that 40 is enough time to stay alive, stay employed, stay capable of speech, when the federal investigator finally arrives to inspect a factory where the evidence keeps disappearing, one fractured jaw at a time. The company lawyer's office smells of leather and pipe tobacco. The settlement offer sits on his desk, printed on heavy paper that feels expensive between your fingers when he slides it across the polished mahogany surface. $1,000 per plaintiff, in exchange for releasing all future claims against United States Radium Corporation and its officers. He explains with practiced patience, $1,000 is generous compensation for unproven injuries. Medical experts have found no evidence of radium poisoning. Accepting settlement avoids lengthy litigation you cannot afford, while your jaw continues to deteriorate, and your family's rent continues to come due monthly. You read the document twice, the numbers are clear. The company offers a settlement of $1,000 per plaintiff, which they describe as generous. The amount equals approximately 6 months of the wages you earned while being poisoned, suggesting they value your dying at half the rate they valued your working. The lawyer taps ash from his pipe into a crystal tray. Miss, you understand the alternative? Years of depositions, expert witnesses, medical examinations. Your condition will worsen during litigation. The court may rule against you. This offer expires in 48 hours. Your jaw aches as you hold the papers. The bone shifts slightly when you speak. What about the other girls? The same offer extends to all plaintiffs who accept within the deadline. Those who refuse will proceed to trial without the benefit of this settlement. Catherine Wiley will arrive in 40 days to find no plaintiffs willing to testify if you sign, no evidence of corporate negligence, no girls whose crumbling jaws contradict Dr. Flynn's syphilis diagnosis. Dr. Frederick Flynn has already prepared his testimony. Columbia University credentials, published findings in the Journal of Industrial Hygiene, medical examination forms pre-printed with language that will document your symptoms as venereal disease rather than occupational poisoning. You set the papers back on his desk. The motion leaves phosphorescent traces on the expensive stationery, green fingerprints that glow in the shadow of the desk lamp. I need to speak with the others before deciding. The lawyer's expression doesn't change. Of course, you have until Friday at 5 o'clock. After that, the offer is withdrawn, and we proceed to litigation. He stands, indicating the meeting has concluded. I should mention that the company has retained additional medical experts. Dr. Flynn's findings will be supported by testimony from Columbia University physicians. You walk back to the factory with hands that still glow green and jaw that still aches and testimony that must survive 6 more weeks. The settlement papers remain unsigned in the lawyer's office. $1,000 to disappear before the federal investigator arrives. $1,000 to convert your death into a transaction the company can afford. The painting station waits. 800 dials per day. Brush tip between your lips to sharpen the point. The phosphorescent powder tastes like metal and adhesive, and the specific price the company assigns to silence. 40 days until Catherine Wiley arrives. You paint numeral after numeral while calculating whether refusing settlement makes you brave or stupid. Whether $1,000 would at least pay your family's rent after you're gone. Whether signing means the company wins, or whether they've already won by making you consider it. Grace Fryer sits 3 stations down, her jaw wrapped in bandages that smell of antiseptic and infection. Quinta MacDonald left last week, too weak to hold the brush steady. Albina Larice still comes to work, but her hands shake when she reaches for the powder jar. The roster of dial painters grows shorter, while Dr. Flynn's examination schedule grows longer. Your hands leave glowing traces on every surface you touch. Evidence that cannot be negotiated away. Testimony written into your skeleton that will outlast any settlement offer, any corporate lawyer, any attempt to purchase your silence before the truth becomes too expensive to contain. The courthouse doors are heavier than you expected. Brass, handles cold against your glowing palms. You push them open into marble hallway, where newspaper reporters wait with cameras and notebooks, their questions overlapping into noise that echoes off stone walls. Catherine Wiley arrived yesterday, 6 weeks late. She found only 4 dial painters still employed at the factory, the rest terminated or hospitalized or dead. You are the only plaintiff whose jaw has not yet fractured completely, the only witness who can still speak clearly enough for court stenographer to transcribe testimony. The reporters press forward. Miss, is it true your hands glow in the dark? Did the company know about the radium? How many girls are sick? You keep walking. Raymond Berry appears at your elbow, his briefcase leather worn at the corners. No comment until after testimony, he says to the reporters. To you, quietly. The judge is waiting. Are you ready? Your jaw aches with intensity that has worsened over 6 weeks of continued painting. The bone so soft now that you can feel it shift when you speak. You nod once. The courtroom gallery is full of spectators who have come to see the ghost girls testify. Their faces curious and pitying in equal measure. You walk down the center aisle while your hands leave phosphorescent traces on the wooden railing. Evidence that glows in the shadows. Dr. Flynn sits at the defense table in a pressed suit, his medical bag at his feet. 43 years old, Columbia University credentials arranged in leather folder before him. He does not look at you as you pass. His attention fixed on the notes he has prepared, examination findings, published research, testimony that will state under oath that radium ingestion poses no health risk to workers. The witness chair is positioned directly beneath the judge's bench, dark wood, arms worn smooth by decades of testimony. You sit carefully. The courtroom settles into silence. Judge Clark looks down from the bench, 60 years old, gray beard trimmed close, reading glasses on a chain around his neck. State your name for the record. Your voice sounds strange in the large room, slightly slurred because your jaw no longer closes properly. The deteriorated bone unable to support normal speech mechanics. The clock on the courtroom wall reads 8:17. Dr. Flynn's examination forms sit ready in his medical bag, pre-printed diagnoses waiting only for your name to be entered in the blank space at the top. The company has calculated this moment precisely: the cost of your silence, the value of your testimony, the price of truth measured against the expense of letting it reach the public record. Catherine Wiley sits in the front row, notebook open, pencil moving across the page. The federal investigator, whose arrival the company tried to prevent with settlement offers and medical examinations and 48-hour deadlines, she is here now. You are here now. The testimony can begin. You realize your crumbling mouth is making testimony difficult at the exact moment testimony becomes most crucial. The bailiff asks you to raise your right hand and swear to tell the truth. Your glowing palm catches light from the courtroom windows. Phosphorescent green visible even in daylight. Several spectators gasp at the evidence your body has become. Do you solemnly swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth? I do. The words come out slurred. Your tongue compensating for the jaw that no longer aligns properly. Raymond Berry stands at the plaintiff's table. Please state your full name and occupation for the record. You give your name. I'm a dial painter at United States Radium Corporation. I've been painting watch dials for 14 months using radium powder. Can you describe the technique you were taught? Lip, dip, paint. We put the brush tip between our lips to sharpen the point. Then dip it in radium powder, mixed with adhesive. Then paint the numerals on the watch dials. 50 times per dial. 800 dials per day. Berry nods. And when did you first notice symptoms? 6 months ago. My jaw started aching. Then 3 teeth loosened. The dentist removed them, but the bone underneath was soft. He said he'd never seen anything like it. The company lawyer objects to your testimony on grounds that you are not a medical expert, cannot prove causation, and may be suffering from venereal disease as Dr. Flynn diagnosed. Judge Clark overrules. The witness may describe her own symptoms and the work conditions she observed. Medical causation is a separate question. Berry continues. Did the company provide any warnings about radium exposure? No. They told us radium was safe, good for our health. Some girls even painted their teeth and nails with it to glow at dances. And Dr. Flynn's examination? He diagnosed syphilis. But I've never. Your voice catches. I've worked at the factory since I was 17. The symptoms started after I began painting dials, not before. The courtroom air tastes of furniture polish and old paper. A radiator ticks in the corner, expanding with heat. Your hands rest on the witness chair arms, leaving faint green traces on the dark wood. Catherine Sharp was meant to testify today, but her jaw fractured last week and she cannot speak. Edna Hussman is hospitalized. Molly Magia died 3 months ago, her entire lower jaw removed in pieces, the bone disintegrating faster than surgeons could excise it. You are what remains, the last witness whose mouth can still form words clearly enough for transcription. Dr. Flynn sits motionless at the defense table. His testimony will follow yours. Medical expertise against factory observation. Columbia University credentials against 14 months of brush tipping technique. His academic reputation depends on the testimony he will give. That radium poses no occupational health risk. That your symptoms indicate moral failure rather than corporate negligence. That the examination forms in his medical bag documents syphilis rather than poisoning. Hazel Kusa watches from the gallery, her hands wrapped in gloves that hide the phosphorescent glow. She refused the settlement offer. So did you. So did the others who remain alive enough to testify. $1,000 or the truth. The company made you choose, and you chose this. Speaking through deteriorating bone about powder that glows in darkness and kills from the inside. while physicians testify, under oath, that it poses no danger to workers. Dr. Flynn testifies under oath that he examined you thoroughly and found no evidence of radium poisoning, that your jawbone deterioration is consistent with venereal disease, not occupational exposure. You prepare to speak through crumbling jaw about 14 months of brush-tipping technique that the company itself mandated for precision work. About hands that glow in darkness and teeth that fell out, and bone that softens from the inside, while medical experts testify that radium poses no health risk to workers. The courtroom is very quiet. Your testimony will either establish precedent or disappear into the same silence that consumed the settlement offer, the safety manual that mentioned no hazards, the census of casualties that grew while the company hired physicians to diagnose moral failure instead of poisoning. You begin to speak. You describe the lip dip paint technique. Your jaw shifts when you talk. The words come slowly, because bone fragments press against soft tissue, where mandible structure should hold firm. Raymond Berry stands beside the witness box. He asks you to explain the method to the court. You open your mouth. Sound emerges through damaged architecture. Brush tip between the lips, you say, to sharpen the point. The stenographer's fingers strike keys in rhythm. Type, 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 pause, type. Each word you speak becomes permanent record. The courtroom holds 53 people. 17 in the gallery, 12 in the jury box. Judge Clark at his bench. Raymond Berry to your left. The company lawyers at their table with papers stacked in precise columns. How many times per shift? Berry asks. 50 times. Sometimes more. Your tongue touches the roof of your mouth where 3 molars once anchored. Empty sockets now. The dentist extracted them in April. Before extraction he tried to drill. The drill bit sank into softened bone like pushing through wet cork. He stopped drilling. Lifted fragments out with tweezers instead. You watched him place the pieces in a steel dish. They were not tooth-shaped anymore. For how long did you use this technique? 14 months. The radium powder tasted metallic and sweet. It coated your tongue with grit that never fully washed away. You would drink water during breaks. The grit would settle at the bottom of the cup. Fine powder the color of old cream. You would paint dials and taste metal and go home glowing in the dark and wake the next morning to paint more dials. 800 per day. 50 brush tips per shift. 14 months of accumulation. Berry moves to exhibit table, returns with photograph, holds it where jury can see. Can you identify this image? That's Quinta's jaw, after the fracture. The photograph shows bone fragmented into 7 pieces. The fragments do not connect cleanly. They separate at angles that bone should not permit. Quinta's mandible broke while she was speaking to her mother. Mid-sentence. The bone simply gave way under the pressure of language itself. Did Miss McDonald work at United States Radium Corporation? Yes. Did she use the lip dip paint technique? Yes. The stenographer types. The jury leans forward slightly. 3 women in the front row. 4 men behind them. All watching you with attention that feels like wait. You realize they are waiting for you to continue. Berry has not asked another question yet. Molly Majora was terminated, you say. Catherine Schaub's x-rays glow in darkness. 3 girls died before federal inspection came. Your voice breaks. Not from emotion. From physical jaw failure. The break happens mid-word. Your mouth was forming the sound and then the structure beneath shifted and the sound changed pitch. You feel bone fragment move inside soft tissue. Small piece. Maybe the size of a grain of rice. It presses against your lower gum. Berry returns to exhibit table. Returns with more photographs. Can you identify these? Medical files. 12 girls fired for symptoms. The company newsletter celebrated ghost girls whose luminous beauty attracts suitors. Published 3 months ago. Article described how the radium painters glow at dances, how their beauty is enhanced by the powder, how suitors are drawn to their phosphorescence like moths to flame. The newsletter did not mention Molly's termination, did not mention Quinta's fractured jaw, did not mention Catherine's X-rays that glow without external light source. Did supervisors teach you the lip dip paint technique? Yes. Was this technique required for employment? Yes. Something shifts in your jaw, deeper than the fragment, something fundamental in the joint mechanism. You feel sudden absence of pressure. The bone that should connect to muscle no longer holds tension. Your mouth still opens and closes, but the sensation has changed. Like pulling a lever that used to resist, and finding only air where resistance should be. Berry looks at you, then at Judge Clark, then back at you. His expression does not change, but his posture shifts slightly, shoulders forward, ready to move. The bone fragment in your lower gum works loose. You feel it separate from tissue, small piece. Sharp edge. It moves with your tongue when you swallow. Then it is in your mouth completely. You could spit it into your hand. You could swallow it. You could let it sit on your tongue while testimony continues. Judge Clark stands. Recess. The gavel falls. Sound like bone breaking. Final and clean. The courtroom erupts into noise. Chairs scraping. Voices overlapping. Feet on marble floor. You remain in the witness box, with mouth closed, and fragment resting on your tongue. Raymond Berry approaches, extends his hand to help you stand. You look at his palm and realize your face may be the most powerful testimony you can offer. Proof that cannot be cross-examined. Evidence that sits in your mouth like a coin that will buy nothing. Dr. Frederick Flynn arrives at 8 o'clock. 43 years old. Columbia University Professor of Physiology. United States Radium Corporation consulting physician. He carries a leather case with brass clasps. Inside, examination forms pre-printed with diagnostic language. Spaces for patient name. Spaces for symptoms. Pre-checked boxes that say syphilis. Pre-checked boxes that say personal moral failing. No boxes for radium. No boxes for occupational poisoning. You sit in the examination room with 5 other painters. Grace Fryer to your left, Albina Larice by the window, Edna Hussman near the door. The room smells of carbolic soap, and something underneath that soap cannot cover. Old blood maybe, or bone rot. The kind of smell that comes from bodies breaking down faster than they can repair. Dr. Flynn opens his case, removes stethoscope, removes tongue depressor, removes forms already filled with conclusions reached before examination begins. He looks at Grace first. Open your mouth, please. Grace opens her mouth. Her jaw makes a sound like wood splitting. Dr. Flynn does not write this down. He places the tongue depressor on her lower teeth. Presses gently. Grace's gum tissue bleeds where the wood touches. Dr. Flynn removes the depressor, wipes it on a cloth. Returns it to his case. Any history of venereal disease in your family? No. Any history of loose moral behavior? Grace's hands are folded in her lap. The bones in her right wrist have begun to soften. You can see the joint sag slightly, where radius should meet carpal bones at rigid angles. She looks at Dr. Flynn with an expression that holds no surprise. She has been examined before. She knows what the questions mean. No, she says. Dr. Flynn writes on the form. His handwriting is precise. Medical school penmanship, each letter properly formed. He checks a box. Then, another. The sound of pencil on paper is the loudest thing in the room. He turns to you next. Open your mouth. You open your mouth. The fragment from yesterday's testimony is gone now. Swallowed sometime during sleep. But other fragments remain. You feel them shift when your jaw moves. Small pieces floating in tissue that should be solid. Dr. Flynn leans forward, looks at your gums, at the gaps where teeth used to be, at the bone visible through torn tissue. How long have you had these symptoms? 18 months. Any history of syphilis? The question lands like a weight. You understand what he is doing. The company needs a diagnosis that places blame on the patient. Needs medical testimony that says the problem originated in your personal life. Not in the studio, not in the radium powder, not in the technique that supervisors taught you and required you to perform 8 hours per day. No, you say. Dr. Flynn writes on the form, checks boxes, the examination continues. Grace, Albina, Edna. Each girl opens her mouth. Each girl shows damage that looks identical. Bone fragments, bleeding gums, teeth that fall out during ordinary speech. Dr. Flynn examines each girl with the same questions, the same pre-printed forms, the same boxes checked before the answers are given. Albina's turn. She sits in the chair with both hands gripping the armrests. Her fingers have begun to curl inward. The bones in her hands are softening like her jaw, like her spine, like the long bones in her legs that now bend slightly when she walks. Dr. Flynn does not measure the curvature, does not note the way her skeletal structure is collapsing under its own weight. Any history of immoral behavior? He asks. Albina does not answer immediately. She looks at the window, at the morning light coming through glass that has been cleaned recently. You can see she is calculating, deciding whether to refuse, whether to walk out, whether to let this examination continue. No, she says finally. Dr. Flynn writes. The pencil scratches paper. Outside the examination room, you hear footsteps in the corridor. Someone walking quickly. Then a door closes, and the sound stops. Edna Hussman is last, youngest of the group, 19 years old. She worked at the studio for 11 months before symptoms began, before her jaw started to ache, before her teeth loosened, before she woke one morning to find blood on her pillow, and a molar in her hand that had come free during sleep. Dr. Flynn examines her mouth, asks the same questions, writes the same conclusions. When he finishes, he closes his case. Brass clasps click shut. He stands, smooths his jacket, looks at the 5 of you sitting in chairs against the wall. The examination is complete, he says. Results will be forwarded to United States Radium Corporation Medical Department. He does not say when, does not say what the results will show, but you already know. The forms were filled before he arrived. The diagnosis was written before he looked in your mouth. His job is not to discover what is wrong. His job is to provide legal documentation that protects the company from liability. Dr. Flynn leaves. The door closes behind him. The 5 of you sit in the examination room with morning light coming through the window, and the smell of carbolic soap still strong in the air. Grace speaks first. They will say it was syphilis. Yes, you say. Albina stands, walks to the window, places her hand against the glass. Her palm leaves a print. Skin oil, and something else. Faint phosphorescence maybe. The kind of glow that comes from radium absorbed into tissue, into bone, into the parts of the body that should be permanent but are dissolving from the inside. Berry needs to know, Edna says. Berry knows, you say. Everyone knows. The room is quiet. Outside you hear a truck pass, gears grinding, then silence again. You think about the forms in Dr. Flynn's case. About the boxes already checked. About the conclusions reached before evidence was examined. You think about academic reputation. About consulting contracts. About the Journal of Industrial Hygiene, and preliminary findings that state radium ingestion poses no health risk to workers. You think about 8 o'clock tomorrow morning, about another examination, about more forms with more boxes checked before the questions are asked. Grace stands. Her wrist sags, she holds it with her other hand, supports the joint that can no longer support itself. We should go, she says. You stand, walk to the door. Grace follows, then Albina, then Edna. Hazel Kuza waits in the corridor. She was examined yesterday. She does not ask what happened, she already knows. You walk together down the corridor, and out into morning light that feels thin and cold and insufficient. The afternoon dissolves into evening. You sit in the room where you have always sat. Chair by the window. Table with lamp. The lamp is off. Daylight comes through glass and falls across your hands resting in your lap. You do not move. Movement requires intention. An intention requires a future, and the future has contracted to the width of this moment. This breath. This particular quality of light. Your jaw aches. Constant pressure. Not sharp, not demanding attention, just present. Like background noise that never stops. You have learned to exist around the pain. To let it occupy space without letting it occupy thought. The ache is weather now. Climate you inhabit. Outside the window, street sounds. Cartwheels on cobblestone. Voices calling. A dog barking 3 houses down. The sounds arrive and pass and leave no mark. You hear them the way you hear your own heartbeat. Acknowledged but not considered. The light shifts. Sun lower now, angle changing. The quality of illumination moves from white to gold. You watch shadow lengthen across the floor. The shadow of the window frame. The shadow of your hands. Everything casts a shape that is not itself. Everything leaves a mark on the surface it touches. You think about testimony, about words spoken into record, about stenographers' keys striking paper in rhythm that will not stop until the trial ends. Type, 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 pause, type. Your voice becoming permanent. Your damage documented. The courtroom holding 53 people, who watched you describe technique that destroyed the bones. It took 18 years to grow. Molly's face appears in memory. Not the way she looked at the end, the way she looked before. Laughing during lunch break, sharing an orange, peeling the rind in one long spiral. She was good at that. Could peel an orange without breaking the rind. Would hold up the spiral and say, look at this. Perfect spiral, perfect orange. She died in bed, alone, mouth full of blood and bone fragments. The doctor who attended her signed the death certificate. Cause of death, syphilis. The doctor did not perform autopsy, did not question the diagnosis, did not look at the employment records that showed 14 months of radium exposure. He wrote syphilis and closed the file, and Molly became a statistic that proved nothing except that young women sometimes die of moral failings. Catherine Schaub's X-rays glow in the dark. The technician discovered this by accident, left the X-rays on a table overnight. Came back the next morning to find them glowing. Faint green phosphorescence. The bones in Catherine's jaw radiating light without external source. The technician showed the X-rays to his supervisor. The supervisor showed them to the hospital director. The hospital director called United States Radium Corporation. The X-rays disappeared. Catherine never saw them again. Quinta MacDonald's jaw broke while she was saying the word mother. Mid-word. The bone gave way between syllables. She felt it separate, felt the structure fail. She was standing in her kitchen. Her mother was at the sink. Quinta opened her mouth to speak, and the bone fractured into 7 pieces, and she tasted blood and felt sharpness where smoothness should be. The light is orange now. Low sun. The shadow of your hands reaches across your lap and touches the opposite wall. You watch the shadow move. Slow movement, imperceptible except in retrospect. You look away. Look back. The shadow has moved. Time passes whether you attend to it or not. Grace Fryer's wrist sags, the bones softening, the joint losing integrity. She holds her right wrist with her left hand when she walks, supports the structure that can no longer support itself. She was the first to hire Raymond Berry, the first to file suit, the first to say the words radium poisoning out loud where lawyers and judges and stenographers could hear. Berry's voice in memory, asking questions. Gentle voice, persistent voice. He asks and waits and asks again. He does not accept the first answer if the first answer is incomplete. He returns to the question, approaches from another angle, finds the truth by asking until the truth is the only thing left to say. Edna Hussman found a tooth on her pillow, woke one morning and there it was, molar, root still attached, blood on the pillowcase. She picked up the tooth, looked at it, placed it in a glass on her nightstand. She still has it, keeps it as evidence, as proof, as something solid she can show when someone asks, are you sure the damage is real? The room darkens. Sun below buildings now. The light changes from orange to gray. The shadow of your hands disappears into general darkness. You do not turn on the lamp. You sit in dimness and feel your jaw ache and listen to street sounds that arrive and pass and mean nothing. Tomorrow Dr. Flynn will submit his report. The report will say syphilis, will say moral failing, will say the damage originated in your personal life and not in the studio, where you painted 800 dials per day, using technique that required you to place radium powder on your tongue 50 times per shift for 14 months. The company newsletter will publish another article, will celebrate the ghost girls, will describe their phosphorescent beauty, will not mention the lawsuits, will not mention the testimony, will not mention the courtroom where you sat with bone fragment in your mouth and described how supervisors taught the technique that is killing you. Berry will continue, will file motions, will subpoena records, will put you on the witness stand again and ask you to describe the lip dip paint technique again, and you will open your damaged mouth and speak the words again. Type, 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 pause, type. The stenographer recording, the jury watching, the judge listening, the company lawyers taking notes they will use to argue that your testimony is unreliable because your mind has been affected by venereal disease. You breathe in and out. The action is automatic. You do not think about breathing, you simply do it. The way you do not think about your heart beating. The way you do not think about your blood moving. The body continues whether you pay attention or not. The ache in your jaw pulses, small rhythm, not synchronized with heartbeat, its own rhythm, pain rhythm. The body announcing damage. Broadcasting failure. You place your hand against your jaw. Feel bone shift under pressure. The structure is temporary now. Borrowed time. You do not know how much longer the bone will hold, how much longer you can speak, how much longer your face will be your face. The room is dark now. Full dark. You sit without moving. The street sounds have stopped. Or maybe they continue, and you have stopped hearing them. Either way, the silence is complete. You think about sleep, about lying down, about closing your eyes and letting the day end. But you do not move. You sit in the chair by the window in darkness that is complete, and feel your jaw ache and breathe in and out, and exist in this moment which is all any moment ever is. The courthouse steps are crowded with reporters and photographers who want statements and images. You stand in afternoon sunlight while cameras flash. Your shoulders drop as tension releases. 6 weeks of waiting. 14 months of painting dials with mouth full of radium. The testimony is lifted now. Your jaw aches less than it did during testimony. The numbness spreads into relief. You realize the worst is documented. The truth is entered into legal record. The precedent is established. Nothing the company does now can erase what has been testified under oath and preserved in court transcripts. The photographers ask you to hold up your hands so the cameras can capture the glow. You raise your phosphorescent palms toward the light while flashbulbs pop. Images that will appear in newspapers across the country. Evidence that will outlive corporate denial and medical fraud. Raymond Berry stands beside you on the courthouse steps. His hand rests briefly on your shoulder. The verdict creates legal precedent, he says. Other workers in other factories will use this case as foundation. You've made that possible. You descend the courthouse steps slowly, because your jaw is numb and your legs are tired. Your body has finished its work of testimony. You walk into afternoon that feels different than morning did. The air lighter now that truth has been spoken and documented and preserved beyond the reach of corporate lawyers and company doctors. Catherine Wiley waits at the bottom of the steps. She takes your hand. 56 dial painters are still employed at facilities across New Jersey, she says. Your testimony gives them legal standing they didn't have yesterday. The federal investigation can proceed now with precedent as foundation. You nod. The afternoon light falls across the courthouse facade. The stone building holds your testimony in its records room. Archived. Permanent. Beyond revision. Evening comes and you rest in quiet room, where sound fades to distant murmur. The courtroom noise recedes into memory that feels both immediate and centuries old. You understand that your testimony has entered the archive of things that cannot be undone or forgotten. The legal precedent established today will echo forward through time, protecting workers you will never meet in factories that do not yet exist. Your crumbling jaw has become citation in case law. Reference point in judicial decisions. Evidence that persists beyond individual mortality. You hear Catherine Wiley's voice explaining that the verdict creates new legal standard for industrial safety. That corporations can no longer claim ignorance about workplace hazards. That your testimony has transformed personal suffering into collective protection. The words fade into gentle static. The archive accepts your testimony and preserves it permanently. You release the weight of documentation, the burden of memory. The necessity of speech. Letting consciousness fragment into rest because the truth has been recorded and cannot be erased by time or corporate interest or medical fraud. Night settles and your jaw releases its ache into numbness that spreads through face and neck and shoulders. The pain dissolving into absence of sensation. You understand that your bones have finished their work of testimony. Evidence preserved in radioactive signature that will glow for 1600 years. The tactile memory of brush-tipping technique fades into gentle pressure, lips no longer tasting metal, tongue no longer coated with grit. You release the physical sensation of 14 months of painting dials, because the documentation is complete, and the precedent is established. Your body has transformed into archive, bones preserving evidence that cannot be destroyed by corporate lawyers or company doctors. You let the weight of that preservation settle into rest, the burden of proof no longer requiring conscious maintenance. Breath slows to archival rhythm. Steady and measured. You drift into sleep that feels like historical permanence. Consciousness fragmenting into the long preservation of truth that outlives individual memory and corporate denial. Deep night and you see the precedent spreading forward through time, like phosphorescent glow, each future case citing your testimony, each worker protected by the legal standard established today. The courtroom transcript becomes foundation for new law, your crumbling jaw becomes reference point in judicial decisions, and you watch the precedent ripple outward through decades of labor protection, consciousness fragmenting into the long arc of justice that bends toward documentation. The vision is soft and certain and permanent, your hands rest motionless in your lap, no longer glowing, the radium faded into bone structure that will outlast memory. The weight of legal precedent settles through your shoulders like gravity, pulling you deeper into rest that requires no maintenance, no vigilance, no continued testimony, because everything has been preserved in transcript, and medical record, and judicial opinion, that cannot be erased by time or corporate interest. Eyelids grow heavy with documented truth, the burden of proof transformed into foundation that supports itself. Each breath comes slower than the last, measured and complete, releasing consciousness into the permanent record that protects workers you will never meet, in factories you will never see, for decades beyond your own brief luminescence. The glow of your hands fades into general luminescence, personal evidence dissolving into collective protection. You drift deeper into rest that feels like historical completion, the precedent established and permanent, and no longer requiring your wakefulness to maintain. The work is preserved beyond individual consciousness, documented truth that outlives bodies and corporations and denial. Sleep comes like archival permanence, steady and irreversible, consciousness fragmenting into the long preservation of legal protection that spreads forward through time like light through darkness, illuminating the path for others who follow where you testified first. Deepest night and you smell nothing now. The factory sweetness and machine oil faded completely, replaced by clean absence that feels like rest after long labor. The scent of preservation surrounds you, archival permanence that requires no maintenance, and you release the last fragments of factory memory into the long storage of legal record that will protect workers for generations beyond your own brief luminescence. Your bones will glow for 1600 years, evidence that cannot be destroyed by time or corporate interest. The half-life of radium-226 is 1600 years, but the half-life of testimony is infinite, preserved in transcript and precedent and protective regulation that spreads forward through decades of labor law reform, your crumbling jaw transformed into legal standard that companies cannot ignore. Consciousness fragments into the peaceful knowledge that documentation outlives individual mortality, that testimony persists beyond the bodies that delivered it. The weight of legal precedent is the last sensation, heavy and permanent and no longer requiring your attention, settling through your shoulders like earth accepting roots pulling you deeper into rest that feels like completion. You drift into sleep that feels like historical permanence, nothing left to prove, because everything has been preserved. The glow continues without you now. Evidence locked in bone structure and legal archive, protected from revision or corporate erasure, spreading forward through time like light that cannot be extinguished. The last breath comes soft and complete, releasing consciousness into the long preservation of truth that outlives empires and corporations and individual memory. Documented permanence that requires no vigilance, because the archive maintains itself beyond your wakefulness. Beyond time now, and you see the long glow of precedent extending forward through centuries, each worker protected by the testimony you delivered with crumbling jaw, each safety regulation built on the foundation of documented truth that cannot be erased. The phosphorescent trail fades into general luminescence that lights the path for others, and you understand that individual suffering has transformed into collective protection, personal dissolution into historical permanence. Your bones will glow longer than empires last. The half-life of radium exceeds the duration of corporate memory. Testimony persists when everything else has crumbled into dust. The glow continues without you now, evidence preserved in legal archive and radioactive bone, protected from time and revision and corporate denial that cannot touch what has been documented. Sleep comes like completion, the work finished and permanent beyond individual consciousness, nothing remaining except the gentle spread of protection through time. Your testimony transformed into foundation that supports itself, requiring no maintenance because the truth has been preserved. Timeless now, and you rest in the archive of documented truth, consciousness dissolved completely into the permanent record that requires no maintenance, no vigilance, no continued testimony, because everything has been preserved. The weight of legal precedent settles into gentle pressure that no longer requires bearing. The burden of proof transformed into foundation that supports itself. and you drift in the peaceful knowledge that your work is complete and permanent. Nothing left to prove because everything has been documented. Nothing left to testify because the transcript is preserved. Nothing left to remember because the archive maintains itself beyond individual consciousness. You rest finally in the long preservation of truth that outlives bodies and corporations and denial. Consciousness dissolved into sleep that feels like historical completion, the precedent established and the testimony preserved, and nothing remaining except the gentle weight of documented permanence, the last sensation before complete rest, and you are sleeping.